The train's fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting sickly yellow shadows across the worn fabric of the seat. I pressed my forehead against the cold window, watching the city blur into darkness as we left the downtown station. My reflection stared back at me, hollow eyes, pale skin, hair pulled into a messy bun that had long since given up any pretense of neatness. 3 double shifts in 4 days at the diner had reduced me to this, a ghost of myself, held together by caffeine and sheer stubborn will. The smell of stale coffee and grease clung to my uniform, no matter how many times I washed it. My feet throbbed in my cheap sneakers, and my lower back sent sharp complaints up my spine with every slight movement. I'd spilled hot coffee on my wrist during the dinner rush. The angry red mark still stung beneath the bandage I'd hastily wrapped around it in the bathroom. Tips had been decent tonight, at least. $243, most of it crumpled singles and fives that I'd counted 3 times before stuffing into my bra. The rent was due in 5 days, and Mrs. Chen didn't accept excuses anymore. The train car was nearly empty at this hour, past midnight on a Tuesday. A homeless man slept across 3 seats near the front, his belongings piled in garbage bags beside him. An elderly woman with a church hat sat primly near the middle, her hands folded over a worn Bible. And then there was the man in the expensive suit. I noticed him immediately, though I tried not to stare. He sat 4 rows ahead on the opposite side of the aisle, and everything about him screamed wrong for this train, this hour, this neighborhood. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders that filled the space with an almost predatory confidence. Even from behind, I could see the quality in the fabric, the kind of suit that cost more than I made in 6 months. His hair was dark, cut with precision, and his hands, God, his hands, rested on his thighs with a stillness that felt dangerous. He wasn't alone. 2 men sat nearby, one in front and one behind him, both wearing dark clothing that bulged slightly at the sides in ways that made my stomach clench. They didn't speak, didn't move, just sat there like statues, their eyes constantly scanning the car with a vigilance that made the air feel thick. I pulled my gaze away, my heart beating faster than it should. None of my business. I had enough problems without noticing men who clearly existed in a world so far removed from mine that we might as well be different species. The train lurched, and my eyes grew heavy. I'd been awake for almost 20 hours, and the rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks was pulling me under like a lullaby. I fought it. I always fought it, because falling asleep on the train meant missing my stop, meant walking an extra 40 minutes through neighborhoods where women like me disappeared. But my body was betraying me. Exhaustion pressing down on my chest like a physical weight. Just 5 minutes, I told myself. I'd rest my eyes for 5 minutes. The darkness swallowed me whole. I woke to warmth. Not the sticky, uncomfortable warmth of the train's broken heating system, but something else. Something solid and unexpectedly comfortable beneath my cheek. The scent hit me first. Expensive cologne, cedar, and something darker, almost smoky. Clean. Powerful. The kind of smell that didn't belong on a midnight train to the outskirts of the city. My eyes snapped open, and horror flooded through me as I realized where I was. I had somehow, God, how, shifted in my sleep, and ended up with my head resting on the shoulder of the man in the expensive suit. Not just resting, practically nuzzled into the curve where his shoulder met his neck, my hand curled against his chest like we were lovers, like I had any right to be this close to him. I jerked upright, heat exploding across my face. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, The words died in my throat as he turned to look at me. His face was all sharp angles and brutal beauty. High cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, lips that were almost cruel in their perfection. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Dark, so dark they were nearly black, and focused on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. There was something ancient in those eyes. Something that had seen too much and felt too little. They studied me with the careful attention of a predator, deciding whether I was prey or simply irrelevant. "Don't apologize," he said, and his voice was silk over steel, accented in a way I couldn't quite place. European, maybe. Eastern European. Each word was measured, controlled. "You were exhausted. I didn't mean to. I should have..." I was babbling, my hands shaking as I gripped the edge of my seat. One of the men, the one in front, had turned slightly, his hand moving inside his jacket. A warning, a threat. I didn't know which, but my survival instinct screamed at me to shut up, to make myself small, to disappear. "You work at the diner," the man continued as if I hadn't spoken. It wasn't a question. "On 5th and Morrison, you take the late shift 3 times a week." Ice water dumped down my spine. "How do you—" "I notice things." He straightened his suit jacket with one hand, and I saw the glint of gold at his wrist. A watch that probably cost more than my entire life. Particularly when something catches my attention. The train was slowing down, my stop. I needed to get off this train, to get away from this man and his guards, and the way his words felt like a trap closing around me. But I couldn't move. His gaze held me pinned like a butterfly to a board, and underneath my fear was something else, something I didn't want to name. "This is my stop," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is it?" He tilted his head slightly, and I saw something flash across his face. Amusement, maybe, or curiosity. "What's your name?" I shouldn't tell him. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to disappear into the night and never look back. But my mouth betrayed me, the word falling out before I could stop it. "Emma," I breathed. "Emma Chen." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Emma." He said it like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth to test the flavor. "I'm Alexei." The train doors hissed open, cold air rushed in, sharp with the smell of rain and diesel. I stood on shaking legs, my bag clutched to my chest like a shield. The 2 guards were watching me now, their faces blank but their bodies tensed, ready to move if their boss gave the word. "It was nice to meet you," I said, because what else could I say? "Sorry I drooled on your $1,000 suit. Please don't have your men kill me for the $243 in my bra." I stumbled toward the doors, my feet clumsy with exhaustion and adrenaline. I was almost there, almost free, when his voice stopped me. "Emma." I turned, unable to help myself. He was standing now, and God, he was tall. Taller than I'd realized, with a presence that seemed to fill the entire car. The overhead lights caught the planes of his face, making him look almost otherworldly. Beautiful and terrible all at once. "Be careful walking home," he said softly. "It's not safe for a woman alone at this hour." There was something in his voice that made my skin prickle. A warning? A promise? I didn't know, and I didn't want to find out. I ran. The platform was empty except for a few stragglers, and I moved quickly toward the stairs, my sneakers slapping against concrete. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I couldn't shake the feeling of those dark eyes watching me, even though I knew he was still on the train, probably already forgetting about the exhausted waitress who'd used him as a pillow. The walk home took 35 minutes. I counted everyone, my hand wrapped around the pepper spray in my pocket, my eyes darting to every shadow. The neighborhood got worse the closer I got to my apartment. Graffiti-covered walls, broken streetlights, the occasional sound of shouting from behind closed doors. But it was home, or at least the closest thing I had to one. A 5th-floor walk-up with paper-thin walls and a radiator that only worked when it felt like it. I climbed the stairs slowly, my body screaming in protest. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and cigarettes, and I could hear Mrs. Patel's television through her door, the tinny sound of a Bollywood movie filtering into the corridor. My apartment was at the end of the hall, 3F, the brass numbers tarnished and hanging slightly crooked. I fumbled with my keys, my hands still shaking, and finally got the door open. The apartment was dark and cold. I flipped the light switch, and the single bulb in the ceiling flickered to life, illuminating my tiny kingdom, a studio apartment with a kitchenette in one corner, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a bed that doubled as my couch, dining table, and entire living space. The window looked out onto a brick wall, and the walls themselves were painted a depressing beige that had probably been white 20 years ago. But it was mine. I'd worked 3 jobs to afford the deposit, and I'd kept it for almost 2 years now, through sickness and slowdowns, and the time I'd nearly lost everything when the diner cut my hours. I locked the door behind me, both locks and the chain, and leaned against it, finally allowing myself to breathe. What the hell was that? I replayed the encounter in my mind, trying to make sense of it. The way he'd known where I worked, the guards with their bulging jackets, the expensive suit and the dangerous eyes, and the voice that made promises and threats in the same breath, Alexei. The name rolled around in my head, foreign and dark. I'd never seen him before tonight, I was sure of it. I would have remembered someone like him. You didn't forget men who looked like they could buy and sell your entire world before breakfast. I peeled off my uniform, wincing as the fabric stuck to the burn on my wrist. The apartment was freezing. The radiator was dead again, so I pulled on my warmest pajamas and crawled into bed without bothering to shower. Tomorrow. I'd deal with everything tomorrow. Sleep came quickly, dragging me down into dreams filled with dark eyes and the scent of cedar. I woke to sunlight. Wrong. That was the first thought that filtered through my sleepy brain. Wrong. 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 My apartment never got direct sunlight. The window faced a brick wall, and even on the brightest summer days, the most I got was a depressing gray twilight that made me feel like I was living in a cave. But this light was golden, warm, streaming through what felt like a massive window. And the bed. I sat up so fast my head spun. This wasn't my bed. This was a bed fit for royalty, with a mattress so soft I felt like I was floating and sheets that felt like silk against my skin. The room around me was enormous, easily 10 times the size of my entire apartment. High ceilings with crown molding, walls painted a soft cream color. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. A massive wardrobe, a dresser with gold handles, a sitting area with a velvet couch and matching chairs, and the window. God, the window. It stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of manicured gardens that went on for what looked like acres. Trees swayed in a gentle breeze, and I could see a fountain in the distance, water sparkling in the morning sun. Panic seized my throat. I threw off the covers and saw that I was still wearing my pajamas, the worn flannel pants and the oversized t-shirt with the hole in the collar. But someone had removed my shoes. Someone had put me in this bed. Someone had taken me. The door opened, and I scrambled backward, my back hitting the ornate headboard. A woman entered, middle-aged, wearing a crisp black dress with a white apron. She carried a tray with what looked like breakfast, and she smiled at me like this was completely normal. "Good morning, Miss Chen," she said in accented English. "Mr. Volkov asked me to bring you breakfast. He hopes you slept well." Volkov. The name hit me like a physical blow, pieces clicking together with horrible certainty. I knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Alexei Volkov, the Volkov family, the Russian Bratva that controlled half the city's underground. Drugs, weapons, protection, anything you could think of that existed in the shadows. And I had fallen asleep on the shoulder of the man who sat at the very top of that dark empire. Where am I? My voice came out as a croak. How did I get here? The woman set the tray on a small table near the window. "You're at Mr. Volkov's estate. He brought you here last night after you fell asleep on the train. He was concerned for your safety. He kidnapped me." The words were sharp, edged with the hysteria bubbling in my chest. Her smile never wavered. "Mr. Volkov prefers to think of it as ensuring your well-being. Your neighborhood is very dangerous at night, particularly for young women. He simply wanted to make sure you were safe. By drugging me? By taking me to—" "You weren't drugged, Miss Chen. You were exhausted. You fell asleep again almost immediately after the train stopped." She gestured to the breakfast tray. "Please, eat. Mr. Volkov will want to speak with you soon, and he prefers his guests to be comfortable and well-fed." She left before I could respond, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that made my stomach drop. I was trapped, in a mansion, with a man who commanded an army of criminals, a man whose single word could end lives, who existed so far above the law that he might as well be untouchable. And he'd brought me here because I'd fallen asleep on his shoulder. I didn't touch the breakfast. Instead, I moved to the window, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet that probably cost more than everything I owned. The glass was thick, the kind that didn't open, and when I pressed my hand against it, I felt the slight hum of something electronic, reinforced, maybe bulletproof. The gardens below were beautiful in a way that felt wrong, too perfect, too manicured, like a painting of what nature should look like rather than the real thing. In the distance, beyond the trees, I could see a high wall, stone, maybe 12 feet tall, topped with something that glinted in the morning sun. Cameras? Barbed wire? Both? Men in dark clothing moved along a path near the wall, their postures alert. Guards. Of course there were guards. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. I tried the door, locked from the outside. My phone. Where was my phone? I frantically searched the room, yanking open drawers in the dresser, checking the nightstand. Nothing. My bag, my shoes, everything was gone except the pajamas I was wearing. The burn on my wrist throbbed, a reminder of my real life. The life that felt impossibly far away now. Mrs. Chen would be looking for the rent in 4 days. The diner would expect me for my shift tonight. How long did he plan to keep me here? What did he want? The thought made my skin crawl. Men like Alexei Volkov didn't do things out of kindness. They didn't rescue exhausted waitresses because they were concerned for their safety. There was always an angle, always a price. I just couldn't figure out what mine was. Time passed strangely in that room. Without my phone, without any clock visible, I could only measure it by the movement of shadows across the floor. An hour? 2? The breakfast grew cold on the tray, and my stomach growled in protest, but I refused to eat. It felt like surrender, like accepting this insanity as normal. When the door finally opened again, it wasn't the maid. Alexei Volkov stood in the doorway, and the room seemed to shrink around him. He'd changed clothes, now wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories I didn't want to know. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and that scent, cedar and smoke, rolled over me like a wave. "You didn't eat," he observed, his dark eyes moving from the tray to me. I'd backed against the far wall, as far from him as the room would allow. My arms wrapped around myself. "You kidnapped me." My voice shook, but I forced the words out anyway. "You had no right. I brought you somewhere safe." He stepped into the room, and I heard the click of the door closing behind him. We were alone. The realization made my heart hammer against my ribs. "Your apartment building had 3 break-ins last month. The walk from the train station passes through territory controlled by the Kozlov Bratva. They have no love for lone women at night." Should I have left you to that? That's not your choice to make. The anger felt good, burning through the fear. You don't get to decide what's safe for me. You don't get to just take people. Something flickered across his face. Amusement? Irritation? It was gone too quickly to read. He moved to the window, his hands sliding into his pockets with casual confidence. From this angle, with the morning light illuminating his profile, he looked like something carved from marble, beautiful and cold and entirely inhuman. "Tell me about your father," he said. The question hit me like a slap. "What?" "Your father. David Chen. Where is he?" My blood turned to ice. "How do you know about my father?" He turned to face me, and his eyes held something I couldn't name. "I know many things, Emma. Your father worked for me 5 years ago. He stole from me. A significant amount of money and information that cost me considerably more than the money itself." The room tilted. I groped behind me for support, my hand finding the wall. No, that's not. My father was a restaurant supplier. He traveled for work. He laundered money," Alexei interrupted, his voice matter of fact. "He moved cash through various businesses, including restaurants. He was very good at it, until he decided to help himself to $2 million of my money and sell information about my operations to a rival organization." I shook my head violently, but pieces were clicking into place with horrible clarity, the way my father had always had cash, even when he claimed the business was struggling. The strange hours, the phone calls he'd taken in another room, his voice dropping to a whisper, the way he'd left 5 years ago, claiming he had to go overseas for an extended business trip, and then, "He disappeared," I whispered. 5 years ago. We never heard from him again." "Yes." Alexei moved closer, and I pressed harder against the wall, but there was nowhere to go. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the small scar above his left eyebrow. the exact shade of his eyes. Not quite black, but the deepest brown I'd ever seen. He ran. I've been looking for him since, but he's very good at hiding. I don't know where he is. The words tumbled out desperately. I swear, I haven't seen him in 5 years. I don't know anything about money or organizations or any of this. Please, you have to believe me. I do believe you. His hand came up, and I flinched, but he only tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers ghosting against my cheek. The gentleness of the gesture was somehow more terrifying than violence would have been. You were 18 when he left, a child. He abandoned you and your mother to face the consequences of his actions. My mother. God, my mother. Where's my mother? Is she safe? He assured me. She remarried 2 years ago. She lives in Seattle now with her new husband and his children. You haven't spoken to her in 6 months. The surveillance was suffocating. He knew everything. Every detail of my pathetic life laid out for his examination. Then let me go. I can't help you find him. I'm useless to you. His hand dropped, but he didn't step back. You're not useless, Emma. You're leverage. The word hung between us like a knife. He won't come for me, I said, my voice breaking. He left us. He doesn't care about me. Perhaps. Alexei tilted his head, studying me with that predatory focus. But men like your father have patterns, weaknesses. Guilt eventually eats at them. And when it does, when he tries to make contact, tries to ensure you're safe, I'll be waiting. So I'm bait. The laugh that escaped me was bitter, edged with hysteria. You're going to keep me here like a worm on a hook, hoping he'll bite. You make it sound so crude. There was something almost like disapproval in his voice. You'll be treated well. You'll have everything you need. This room is yours. The grounds are extensive. You'll have freedom to move, within reason. All I ask is that you stay. And when your father contacts you, you tell me. And if he never does, if he really doesn't care, for the first time, something genuinely warm entered his expression, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but transformed his face nonetheless. Then I suppose you'll be my guest for quite some time. He moved toward the door, and panic surged through me. Wait. How long? How long are you planning to keep me here? He paused, his hand on the doorknob. As long as it takes, Emma. Days, weeks, months. However long I need to draw him out. His eyes found mine across the room. I suggest you get comfortable. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I heard the lock turn. I slid down the wall, my legs giving out, and wrapped my arms around my knees. This couldn't be happening. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, in news stories about other people, not to waitresses who just wanted to pay their rent and survive another day. But it was happening. I was trapped in a mansion with a man who commanded criminals, who knew everything about me, who planned to use me as bait to catch a father who'd abandoned me 5 years ago. And the most terrifying part, the small, traitorous part of my brain that had noticed how gentle his touch had been, how the light had caught in his dark hair, how his presence had made me feel something other than invisible for the first time in years. I hated that part of myself almost as much as I hated him. The days began to blur together. I was given clothes, expensive ones that fit perfectly, which meant he'd had my size all along. Had he planned this? The thought made me sick. Dresses, slacks, soft sweaters in cashmere and silk. Everything in muted colors, cream, gray, navy, as if he was trying to erase me, make me into something that fit his world. I refused to wear them at first, staying in my pajamas like a stubborn child. But on the 3rd day, when the maid, her name was Irina, brought a tray of food and found me still in the same clothes, she'd clucked her tongue with such genuine distress that I'd felt guilty. Mr. Volkov gave specific instructions that you be comfortable, she'd said, her accent thickening with concern. Please, Miss Chen, make this easier on yourself. So I'd compromised. I wore the clothes, but I didn't eat breakfast. Small rebellions were all I had. The room became both prison and sanctuary. I explored every inch of it. The ensuite bathroom with its marble shower and tub deep enough to swim in, the walk-in closet filled with clothes I didn't choose, The sitting area where I'd stare out the window for hours, watching the guards patrol and the gardeners tend to flowers I couldn't name. Alexei visited twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. He never stayed long. 10 minutes, maybe 15. He'd ask me questions. How did I sleep? Was the food acceptable? Did I need anything? As if this was a hotel, and I was a valued guest rather than a prisoner. I stopped answering after the second day. Let him talk to silence. But he was patient. He'd sit in one of the velvet chairs, completely at ease, and tell me about his day, business meetings, calls with associates in Moscow and New York. A problem with a shipment that had been resolved efficiently, a word that made my stomach turn, because I knew what it meant in his world. On the 5th day, he brought me a book. "You're bored," he said, setting it on the table beside my untouched dinner. It was a novel. Jane Eyre, the spine worn with age. "Irina says you spend hours staring out the window. This might be a better use of your time." I looked at the book, then at him. "I want to go home. I know." He settled into his chair, crossing one ankle over his knee. Today he wore a 3-piece suit in charcoal gray, and a watch that probably cost more than my entire year's rent glinted at his wrist. "Tell me something, Emma. What would you be doing right now if you were home?" "Working." The word came out bitter. "I'd be on my feet for 8 hours, carrying plates to people who don't see me, collecting tips that barely cover rent." "You enjoy this work?" "Nobody enjoys being a waitress." "It's survival." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and the intensity of his gaze made me want to look away. I didn't. "And after work? What then?" "I'd walk home in the dark, pray nobody bothered me, unlock 3 separate locks on my door, and fall into bed in a room so cold I can see my breath in winter." I tilted my chin up. But it would be my choice, my life. Not some gilded cage because you're obsessed with revenge against a man who probably doesn't even remember he has a daughter. Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or recognition. "You think this is a cage, isn't it?" I gestured around the opulent room. Beautiful prison is still a prison. He stood abruptly, and I tensed, but he only moved to the window. The sunset painted him in shades of gold and shadow, softening the harsh lines of his face. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "you'll join me for dinner. Not here. Downstairs in the dining room. Is that an invitation or a command?" He turned to look at me over his shoulder, and for just a moment, I saw something raw in his expression. Something almost lonely. "Does it matter?" "You'll refuse either way." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with Jane Eyre and the fading light. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the impossibly soft bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about my father, David Chen. I'd spent 5 years convincing myself that I hated him for leaving, for abandoning us to bankruptcy and questions from men in suits who'd come asking about money we didn't have. But underneath the hate was something worse. Hope. The stupid, childish hope that maybe he'd had a good reason. Maybe he'd left to protect us. Maybe he still thought about me, still cared. Now I knew the truth. He was a criminal who'd stolen from criminals, and his daughter was paying the price. The knock on my door came at 7 the next evening. I'd spent the day reading Jane Eyre, finding uncomfortable parallels between Jane's captivity at Thornfield and my own situation. When Irina entered, she carried a dress on a hanger, deep emerald green, with a neckline that would show too much, and a hem that would show too little. "Mr. Volkov asks that you wear this for dinner," she said, laying it across the bed. "Tell Mr. Volkov that I'm not his doll." She smiled sadly. "Please, Miss Chen, he can be difficult when his wishes are not met. This is such a small thing." The guilt tactic worked. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing myself. The dress fit like it was made for me, because it probably was. My hair, which I'd been wearing in its usual messy bun, fell in waves around my shoulders. Irina had provided makeup, but I'd drawn the line there. I was already becoming someone I didn't recognize. I wouldn't paint my face to complete the transformation. The hallway outside my room was long and lined with portraits of stern-faced men in various centuries of dress. Guards stood at intervals, different men from the ones I'd seen through the window. all wearing suits that didn't quite hide the weapons underneath. They nodded as I passed, but didn't speak. Irina led me down a grand staircase with a banister that gleamed with polish. The mansion revealed itself in pieces. High ceilings with crystal chandeliers, marble floors that echoed with each step, walls covered in art that probably belonged in museums. It was beautiful and cold, like everything else in Alexei's world. The dining room could have seated 30 people. Instead, a table for 2 had been set near the fireplace, where flames danced and crackled. Silver candlesticks, china so delicate it looked like it would shatter if you breathed on it. And Alexei, standing near the window with a glass of something amber in his hand. He turned when I entered, and his expression did something complicated. Emma. My name was almost reverent. You look like someone I'm not, I finished coldly. But his eyes said something different. They traveled over me slowly, and I felt that gaze like a physical touch. When they met mine again, there was heat there. Possession. Something that made my breath catch despite my anger. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair nearest the fire. Please. I sat because my legs felt suddenly unsteady, and I hated myself for it. Dinner was served by silent staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Course after course of food I couldn't name. Delicate fish with sauces that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Vegetables arranged like art. Wine that tasted like liquid velvet. I forced myself to eat, my stomach finally overriding my stubborn pride. Alexei watched me throughout, barely touching his own food. He'd shed his jacket, and the white shirt beneath revealed the powerful lines of his body. A body built for violence, I reminded myself, for control. You're staring, I said, reaching for my water glass. You're beautiful. His directness was unnerving. No games, no pretense. Just raw statement of fact. I've thought so since the moment I saw you on that train, exhausted and invisible to everyone except me. You didn't see me before that night. I took a sip, needing something to do with my hands. Did you? A slight smile curved his lips. I saw you 3 weeks before. You spilled coffee on a customer who'd grabbed your wrist. You apologized even though he was the one at fault. I was having a business meeting at the restaurant across the street. I watched you through the window and thought, that woman is breaking herself for people who don't deserve her breath. The confession made my skin prickle. 3 weeks. He'd been watching me for 3 weeks. That's not romantic. That's terrifying. I know. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I had you investigated that same day. I learned about your father within hours. About his betrayal, his theft. Do you know what I thought when I discovered David Chen's daughter was serving coffee for minimum wage? I didn't want to know, but I asked anyway. What? I thought, here is my revenge and my salvation in one. His eyes were dark fire. Your father took from me. You would be the payment of that debt. Simple, clean. But. There had to be a but. The intensity in his gaze promised complications. But then I saw you fall asleep on the train. He set down his glass with careful precision. You used me as a pillow, Emma. This body that men fear. This shoulder that has borne the weight of an empire built on blood. You curled against it like it was safe. Like I was safe. My throat tightened. I was exhausted. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. He stood, and suddenly he was beside my chair, one hand on the carved wood back, leaning down until I could feel the heat of him. When was the last time someone made you feel safe? When was the last time anyone protected you, cared whether you ate or slept or survived another day? That's not... My voice cracked. You can't just kidnap someone and call it protection. Can't I? His hand moved to my face, cupping my jaw with a gentleness that belied the calluses on his palm. Your landlord is a predator who raises rent whenever he needs money. Your boss steals from your tips. The men in your neighborhood look at you like prey. But here, his thumb traced my cheekbone, and I hated how my body leaned into the touch. Here, you eat food prepared by a chef. You sleep in a bed fit for royalty. You're guarded by men who would die before they let harm come to you. Tell me, Emma, which life is truly the cage? I jerked away from his touch, Standing so abruptly, my chair scraped against marble. The one where I don't have a choice. You don't get to rewrite reality because you've convinced yourself this is noble. You took me because you wanted leverage against my father. Everything else, the clothes, the room, this dinner, it's just dressing up the truth. His jaw tightened, the only sign I'd struck a nerve. You're right. I took you for leverage. But I keep you because... He stopped, something flickering behind his eyes that looked almost like uncertainty. Because what? I challenged. Because when you look at me, you don't see the monster. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Everyone in my world sees what I've built, the power, the fear, the blood, but you? You see the man who let a stranger sleep on his shoulder, and I find I'm not ready to lose that. The vulnerability in his confession scared me more than his threats ever could. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to be simply evil, straightforward to hate. But the man standing before me looked lost, and something in my chest twisted painfully. I want to call my work, I said instead, redirecting desperately. They'll think I abandoned my job. I need the money, I've handled it. He moved back to his chair, and the moment of rawness was gone, replaced by cool efficiency. I sent word that you had a family emergency and needed extended leave. Your position will be held for you. You can't just... I can. I did. He drained his glass. Your rent has been paid through the end of the year. Mrs. Chen received a cashier's check with a note explaining you'd come into a small inheritance. I stared at him, my mind reeling. You're erasing my life. I'm removing the obstacles that kept you trapped in survival mode. He met my gaze squarely. When you eventually leave here, if you leave, you'll have choices you never had before. Money saved. No debt hanging over you. Freedom to decide what you actually want, rather than simply enduring what life forces on you. I don't want your blood money. The words came out harsh. My money is no more stained than the tips you earned serving men who undressed you with their eyes. His voice was cold now, businessman rather than the almost vulnerable man from moments ago. At least I'm honest about what I am. We stared at each other across the candlelit table, and I felt something shift between us. Dangerous territory. The kind where captor and captive started to blur, where Stockholm Syndrome wrapped its tendrils around common sense. I want to go outside, I said finally. You said I'd have freedom to move within the grounds. I want that. Tomorrow. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. I'll arrange it, but he held up a hand when I started to interrupt. You'll have a guard, non-negotiable. The estate is secure, but I don't take chances with what's mine. I'm not yours. His smile was predatory. Aren't you? You're wearing the dress I chose, eating the food I provided, sleeping in my house under my protection. Your father made you mine the moment he stole from me. Everything else is just details. I wanted to argue, to throw the words back in his face, but exhaustion swamped me, emotional this time rather than physical. I was so tired of fighting, of being angry, of holding myself rigid against the gravitational pull of this man and his dark empire. I want to go back to my room, I whispered. He stood immediately, offering his hand like a gentleman at a ball, rather than a man who'd orchestrated my captivity. I'll walk you. That's not necessary. No, he agreed. But I want to. I ignored his hand and walked toward the door. He followed at a respectful distance, and somehow that was worse than if he'd tried to touch me. The mansion felt different at night, shadows pooling in corners, the artwork seeming to watch with disapproving eyes. Guards nodded as we passed. Staff disappeared into doorways. Everyone in this house moved around Alexei like he was the sun, dangerous and necessary all at once. At my door, he stopped. Emma. I turned, my hand on the doorknob. Your father will surface eventually. Men like him always do. And when he does, I'll have my revenge. His eyes were bottomless in the dim hallway light. But until then, I find I'm in no hurry. Having you here, it's reminded me that not everything must be about blood and debt. What's that supposed to mean? He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear just as he had that first day. It means you're safer with the monster you know than the world that would devour you. Sleep well. Emma Chen. He walked away, his footsteps echoing on marble, leaving me standing in the doorway with my heart pounding and my mind spinning with thoughts I definitely shouldn't be having about my captor. I locked myself in, though the locks were on the outside too. A reminder that the illusion of control was just that, an illusion. But as I changed out of the emerald dress and crawled into bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me. Like I was precious, like I mattered. And God help me, I couldn't remember the last time anyone had looked at me that way. Morning came with Irina's gentle knock and the promise of freedom, however limited. She brought clothes suitable for outdoors, dark jeans that fit perfectly, a soft cream sweater, and a jacket lined with fur, boots that were both practical and expensive. I dressed quickly, hating how good everything felt against my skin, how each piece had clearly been chosen with care. The guard waiting outside my door was new. Younger than the others I'd seen, maybe late 20s, with sandy hair and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. He nodded respectfully when I emerged. Miss Chen, I'm Dmitri. Mr. Volkov has assigned me to accompany you today. His English was heavily accented but clear. We can go wherever you wish within the estate grounds. Can we go outside the estate grounds? I already knew the answer. His apologetic smile confirmed it. I'm afraid not. But the grounds are extensive. Gardens, a greenhouse, the lake, it's quite beautiful. A gilded cage with a larger perimeter. Still a cage. But the need for fresh air, for sky above my head rather than ornate ceilings, was overwhelming. I followed Dmitri down the grand staircase and through corridors I hadn't seen before. The mansion revealed itself in pieces. A library with floor-to-ceiling books, a music room with a grand piano, rooms whose purposes I could only guess at. Everything was pristine, expensive, empty. The back doors opened onto a terrace that took my breath away. Stone pathways wound through gardens that belonged in magazines. Roses, despite the season, bloomed in carefully tended beds. A fountain bubbled nearby, the sound of water almost musical. And beyond it all, through perfectly manicured lawns and stands of trees, I glimpsed the lake Dmitri had mentioned. Water sparkling in the morning sun. I walked, and he followed at a discreet distance, close enough to protect, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. The air was clean and cold, biting at my cheeks and filling my lungs with something that tasted like freedom, even if it wasn't. How long have you worked for him? I asked, after we'd walked in silence for 10 minutes. Dmitri seemed surprised I'd spoken. 6 years, miss. Since I was 22. And you're okay with what he does? A pause. Then carefully. Mr. Volkov saved my life. My sister's life. We owed debts to very bad men who would have sold her to pay what we couldn't. Mr. Volkov paid the debts and gave me work. Gave my sister a chance at university, at a real life. His voice held absolute loyalty. What he does to protect his people. To build something that lasts. Is it always clean? No. But it's honest, in its way. I thought about that as we walked. How many people in Alexei's empire had similar stories? How many owed him their lives, their loyalty, their willingness to look away from the blood? The greenhouse was massive, glass walls reflecting the sun in blinding fragments. Inside, it was warm and humid, filled with plants I'd never seen before. Orchids in impossible colors. Fruit trees bearing lemons and oranges despite the season, and in the center, a small seating area with wrought iron furniture painted white. Alexei sat there, reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee steaming on the table beside him. My heart did something complicated in my chest. He looked different here, more relaxed. The harsh lines of his face softened by the dappled sunlight filtering through leaves. He'd rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows, and I could see more of those scars, silver against tan skin. Stories written in violence. He looked up as I entered, and something lit in his eyes. Emma, I hoped you'd find your way here. Did you? I stayed near the door, Dmitri a silent presence behind me. Or did you arrange for Dmitri to guide me here? His smile was slow, acknowledging the truth. Can't it be both? I wanted to see you, but I also wanted you to have the illusion of choice in the matter. At least you admit it's an illusion." He set down the newspaper and gestured to the chair across from him. "Join me. Please. Dmitri, wait outside." The guard left without hesitation, and suddenly I was alone with Alexei in this cathedral of glass and green. The air smelled like earth and flowers, almost overwhelming in its richness. I sat because standing felt like a battle I didn't have energy for. "What do you want?" "To have coffee with you, to see how you slept, to—" He paused, and something vulnerable flickered across his face again. "To spend time with you without the weight of dinner formalities or locked doors between us. The doors are still locked. I'm still your prisoner." "Yes." He poured coffee from a carafe into a second cup, adding cream without asking how I took it. He knew. Of course he knew. But perhaps we can pretend for an hour that you're here because you want to be. Why? I took the coffee, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "Why does that matter to you?" He leaned back, studying me with that unsettling intensity. "Do you know what my life consists of, Emma? Meetings where men lie to my face and I decide whether they die for it. Business that requires constant vigilance because one moment of weakness means war. Women who throw themselves at me because they want what I can buy them, or because they've been told to get close to me for information." His voice was matter-of-fact, reciting a grocery list of horrors. "And then there's you. You, who fell asleep on my shoulder because you were too exhausted to care about the danger, who argue with me, who look at me with anger rather than fear or calculated desire. You want me to make you feel human?" The laugh that escaped me was bitter. "That's not my job. That's not why I'm here. No. You're here because of your father's sins." He set down his cup with deliberate care. "But what if you could be here for something else? What if instead of prisoner and captor we could be something different?" The implication hung between us, dangerous and tempting. "You mean like the women who throw themselves at you for money?" "No." The word was sharp. "I mean like two people who see each other. Really see each other. Not the waitress or the Bratva boss. Just Emma and Alexei." I wanted to laugh, to throw the coffee in his face and tell him he was delusional, but the way he was looking at me, God. The way he was looking at me made something in my chest ache, like I was water, and he was a man dying of thirst. "You can't just erase what you've done," I said quietly. "You took me. You're holding me here. You're using me as bait. That's who you are. That's what this is. I know." He stood, moving around the table until he was beside my chair. "Close enough to touch, but not touching. But I'm also the man who makes sure you eat, who gives you books because you're bored, who lies awake at night, thinking about the way you looked in that green dress, and hating myself for wanting you when I have no right." My breath caught. "Alexei, I'm going to find your father, Emma. That hasn't changed. But what happens after? What happens between us? That could be different." His hand came up slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his fingers traced my jaw, tilted my face up to meet his eyes. "Let me court you. Let me show you that I can be more than your captor." "Court me?" The word felt absurd. "You can't court someone you're holding prisoner." "Then tell me what you need. What would make you feel less like a prisoner and more like—" He hesitated. "More like someone choosing to stay." It was the vulnerability in his voice that broke something in me. This man who commanded an empire, who could order deaths with a word, was asking what would make me happy. "I need my phone," I said. "I need to be able to contact the outside world, to know that I still exist beyond these walls." He considered this, his thumb still tracing small circles against my cheek. "If I give you a phone, monitored, I won't lie about that. Will you promise not to call the police? Would they even help if I did?" His smile was grim. "No, I own enough of them. But others might try. Rivals who would love to use you against me. FBI agents who've been trying to build a case for years. You'd be trading one cage for another, and theirs would be far less comfortable. How reassuring," I said dryly. "I'm not trying to reassure you, I'm being honest." His hand dropped, and I felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. "I can give you a phone, computer access, carefully monitored. But Emma, if you betray me, if you try to use those tools against me, the consequences won't fall on you alone. Your mother in Seattle, her new family, even Mrs. Chen, your former landlord. I protect what's mine, and I destroy what threatens it. The threat was delivered calmly, almost gently, but it landed like a blow. You'd hurt innocent people because of what I do. I'd hurt anyone who poses a risk to my operation. Yes, that's the world I live in. The world your father dragged you into when he stole from me. He cupped my face with both hands now, forcing me to hold his gaze. But I don't want to threaten you, Emma. I want to give you everything. I want to see you smile because you're happy, not because you're pretending. I want you to wear those dresses because you feel beautiful, not because you're playing a role. You want to own me. The words came out as a whisper. Yes. The honesty was brutal. I want to own you the way you've somehow come to own me. I want you to be mine in every way that matters. Body, heart, choice. But I want you to give those things willingly, not because you have no other option. That's impossible. You've made it impossible, have I? He leaned down, his forehead almost touching mine, his breath warm against my lips. Or are you fighting what you feel because you think you should? Because society says you can't want the man who took you, even if that man would burn the world to keep you safe. My hands came up, and I didn't know if I was going to push him away or pull him closer. They rested against his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart under expensive cotton. This is insane. Yes. His lips brushed my forehead, achingly gentle. But insanity seems to be my destiny where you're concerned. He pulled back before I could respond, putting distance between us with visible effort. I'll have a phone brought to your room this afternoon, and a laptop. You can call your mother if you'd like. Check your email. Just remember, I'll know every word, every contact. Complete transparency, Emma. That's the price of this freedom. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Now come. He offered his hand. Let me show you the rest of the grounds. The lake is beautiful this time of morning, and I find I'm not ready to let you go just yet. I should have refused, should have walked back to my cage and locked myself in, away from his touch and his words, and the dangerous way he made me feel seen. Instead, I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and we walked out of the greenhouse together. Dmitri fell into step behind us, a silent shadow, as Alexei led me down winding paths toward the lake, and for one stolen hour I let myself forget that I was a prisoner. Let myself pretend that the man holding my hand was just a man, and I was just a woman, and the world outside these walls didn't exist. It was the most dangerous thing I'd done since falling asleep on his shoulder. The phone arrived that afternoon, sleek and new, along with a laptop that probably cost more than I'd earned in the past year. True to his word, Alexei had been transparent about the monitoring. A small icon in the corner of each screen reminded me constantly that everything I did was watched. I called my mother first, my hands shaking as I dialed the number I still knew by heart, despite the months of silence between us. She answered on the third ring. Hello? Mom. My voice cracked. It's me. It's Emma. The pause stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, Emma? Oh my God. Emma, where have you been? Your landlord said you'd left town for a family emergency, but you didn't call. You didn't... I know, I'm sorry. I'm okay, what could I say? I've been kidnapped by a Russian mobster because Dad stole from him. I needed some time away to figure things out. We talked for 20 minutes, her voice filling in the details of her new life. Her husband, Tom, his teenage daughters who were finally warming up to her, the house in Seattle with the view of the mountains. She sounded happy in a way I'd never heard before, and it made something in my chest both ache and heal simultaneously. Come visit, she said before we hung up. Once you're settled, wherever you are. I want you to meet Tom properly. I want you to be part of this. I will. I promised, knowing it was likely a lie. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. So much. After we disconnected, I sat staring at the phone for a long time. Alexei's threat echoed in my mind. If I betrayed him, she'd suffer, her new family. The happiness I'd heard in her voice, all of it could be destroyed with a word from him. The laptop beckoned. I opened it, navigated to my email. Hundreds of unread messages, most of them spam. But there, buried among the junk, was one that made my blood run cold. The sender was listed as DC, my father's initials. The date was from 3 days ago. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." My hands trembled as I clicked it open. "Emma, I know I have no right to contact you after all this time. I know what I did. Leaving you and your mother to face the consequences of my choices was unforgivable. But I've been watching from a distance, making sure you're safe, and I've seen that you're no longer at your apartment, that you've disappeared. If Volkov has found you, if he's using you to get to me, I need you to know. I'm coming. I'll turn myself in. I'll face whatever he wants to do to me. But I won't let him hurt you. I'm your father. I failed you once. I won't fail you again. Meet me at the old pier on Miller's Bay, November 20th at midnight. Come alone. We'll figure this out together. I love you. I always have. Dad, the date, November 20th. That was tonight. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. This was it. The moment Alexei had been waiting for. My father surfacing, offering himself up. All I had to do was tell Alexei, and this would be over. I'd be released. My debt, my father's debt, would be paid. But my father would die. I knew that with absolute certainty. Men like Alexei didn't forgive betrayals that cost them millions and nearly destroyed their operations. They took their revenge in blood. A knock on my door made me jump. I closed the laptop quickly, my heart hammering. Come in. Alexei entered, and one look at my face told him everything. What happened? Nothing. I called my mother. It was emotional. He moved closer, his eyes searching mine. You're lying to me. It wasn't a question. He glanced at the laptop, then back to me. What did you find? I could lie. Should lie. But his eyes held mine, and I remembered his words in the greenhouse. Complete transparency, Emma. That's the price of this freedom. My father contacted me. The words felt like stones. 3 days ago. He wants to meet. Alexei went very still. Where? If I tell you, you'll kill him. Yes. No hesitation. No pretense. He stole from me. Betrayed me. Caused the deaths of 3 of my men when he sold information to the Kozlovs. His death is already written, Emma. The only question is when and how. He's my father. My voice broke. He's the only father I have, and yes, he's a bastard who abandoned me. But I can't. I can't just hand him over to die. Alexei cupped my face, his touch achingly gentle despite the violence in his words. He handed you over the moment he took my money. Everything that's happened since, you being here, me wanting you, this impossible situation we're in, it all stems from his choices. Not yours, not mine. His. Then let him go. I gripped his wrists, desperate. You have money. You have power. What's $2 million to you? What's one man's betrayal when you have an empire? It's not about the money. His voice was soft, almost sad. It's about the message it sends. If I let your father walk away unpunished, every man in my organization will think betrayal is negotiable. They'll think they can steal, sell secrets, cost lives, and face no consequences. I'll lose everything I've built, not because of money, but because of perceived weakness. So I'm just supposed to watch you kill him? Live with that? No. He pulled me against his chest, one hand cradling the back of my head. You're supposed to trust that I'll do what's necessary, and then let me spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Let me give you everything your father never could. Security, safety, a life without fear. Let me be the man you deserve instead of the one who failed you. I pushed away from him, anger flaring hot. You can't replace my father by killing him. That's not how this works. Then what do you want, Emma? He spread his hands. Tell me what you want, and if it's in my power, I'll give it to you. I want you to let him go. That's the one thing I can't do. We stared at each other, the impossible gulf between us suddenly painfully clear. He would kill my father. I couldn't forgive that. No matter what he'd done to me, no matter how he'd made me feel, this was the line. When is the meeting? Alexei asked quietly. I could still lie. Could send him to the wrong place, the wrong time. give my father a chance to run, to disappear again. But then I thought about Alexei's threats. My mother, Mrs. Chen. All the innocent people who'd suffer if I betrayed him. Tonight, I whispered. Midnight. Miller's Bay Pier. Something that might have been pain flickered across his face. You told me. You gave me no choice. I gave you exactly a choice. You chose your mother's safety over your father's life. You chose the innocent over the guilty. He moved to the door, his hand on the knob. That's not weakness, Emma. That's strength. It doesn't feel like strength. Tears were streaming down my face now. It feels like betrayal. He paused, his back to me. Your father made his choices. You're not responsible for the consequences. Remember that. When you hate me later. Then he was gone, and I collapsed onto the bed, sobbing into pillows that smelled like cedar and smoke, and the man who was about to destroy what was left of my family. The hours until midnight crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to read, to distract myself, but the words blurred on the page. Finally, around 11, I made a decision. I was going to that pier. If my father was going to die because of me, the least I could do was face it. Getting out of my room was easier than I expected. The door was unlocked, and the guards in the hallway nodded to me as I passed. They didn't try to stop me as I made my way downstairs and out through the kitchen entrance. Either Alexei had given orders to let me go, or they assumed I couldn't get far anyway. They were right. Dmitri materialized from the shadows as I crossed the lawn, his expression apologetic. I'm sorry, Miss Chen, but I can't let you leave the grounds alone. Then come with me. I kept walking toward the garage, where I'd seen the vehicles earlier, but I'm going to that pier, with or without permission. He hesitated, then spoke into a radio in rapid Russian. A response crackled back. He sighed. Mr. Volkov says I'm to drive you. But you stay in the car, yes, no matter what happens. I agreed, though we both knew it was a lie. The drive took 40 minutes, Dimitri's sleek black SUV eating up the miles of highway between the estate and the bay. Miller's Bay was an industrial area, mostly abandoned now. Old warehouses and piers that had once serviced cargo ships. The pier my father had specified jutted out into dark water, illuminated only by a half-moon struggling through clouds. Dmitri parked in the shadows of a warehouse. Wait here, he said firmly. Please, Miss Chen. Mr. Volkov will have my head if anything happens to you. I watched him melt into the darkness, presumably to take up a position where he could watch the pier. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stay in the car, Emma. I mean it. Of course he'd tracked me. Known I'd come. I stared at the message, then at the pier where a lone figure stood at the end, collar turned up against the wind. My father. I was out of the car before I could think better of it, my feet carrying me across broken pavement toward the man I hadn't seen in 5 years. He turned at the sound of my approach, and even in the dim light I could see how he'd aged. More gray in his hair, lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. Emma. His voice cracked. Oh God, Emma, you came. You're safe. I was so worried. You should be worried about yourself. I stopped several feet away, unable to make myself close the distance. Alexei knows you're here. He's probably watching us right now. My father's face went pale. Then you need to run. Get away from here. Get away from him. I live with him, Dad. The words tasted bitter. In his mansion. Wearing clothes he bought. Eating food he provides. Because you stole from him. And now I'm paying your debt. He flinched like I'd struck him. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I could take the money and disappear. Start over somewhere safe. Send for you and your mother once I was settled. But Volkov, he has reach everywhere. I couldn't risk leading him to you, so you just abandoned us instead. Left us to deal with the bankruptcy, the questions, the shame. I know. And I'm sorry. I've been sorry every day for 5 years. He took a step toward me, but I'm here now. Let me fix this. Let me turn myself in, face whatever punishment he wants. Just promise me you'll get away from him. Promise me you won't let him keep you. It's not that simple. Movement in the shadows caught my eye. Figures emerging from the warehouses, surrounding us. Alexei's men. He won't just let me go, and even if he would, I stopped, the truth catching in my throat. You what? My father's voice was desperate. I don't know if I want to go. The admission felt like ripping open my chest. He's arrogant and controlling, and he kidnapped me. But he makes me feel like I matter, like I'm not just invisible, and I hate that I feel that way. I hate that part of me wants to stay, but it's true. My father stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Emma, that's Stockholm Syndrome. He's manipulating you. Maybe, I shrugged helplessly, or maybe I'm just so starved for someone to see me that I'll take it even from the monster who's holding me captive. Either way, your choices made this situation, not mine. Then hate me. His voice broke. Hate me for the rest of your life, but get away from him. Please. Before it's too late. Before you can't distinguish between captivity and what? Love? The word hung between us, terrible and true. You think I don't know how messed up this is? You think I haven't spent every day fighting against how he makes me feel? That's enough. Alexei's voice cut through the night, and suddenly he was there, stepping out of the shadows like he'd materialized from them. He wore all black, and in the moonlight, he looked like death itself. David Chen. We finally meet again. My father straightened, facing him with a bravery I hadn't expected. Volkov, I assume you're here to kill me. That was the plan. Alexei moved past me, close enough that I felt the heat of him, and stopped a few feet from my father. 5 years I've been hunting you. 5 years of resources, of men searching, of waiting for you to surface. And here you are, delivered by the one thing I knew you couldn't resist. Your daughter. She had nothing to do with my choices. No. She's simply the one paying for them. Alexei glanced at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Which brings me to a dilemma. I'd planned to kill you, to make it slow, painful, a lesson to anyone who thinks about betraying me. But your daughter, he turned back to my father, your daughter asked me to let you go, and I find that I would give her almost anything she asks for. Hope flared in my father's eyes. Then let me leave. I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. I'm not finished. Alexei's voice hardened. The money you stole, $2 million. You'll repay it. Every cent with interest. 20% per year for 5 years is, he calculated quickly, approximately $5 million. My father's face fell. I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll work it off. Alexei smiled, and it was terrifying. I have businesses that need managing. Legitimate ones, mostly. Import-export. You'll work for me, under supervision, and every dollar you earn goes toward your debt. When it's paid, you're free to go. And if I refuse, then I kill you here. And Emma watches. Alexei's eyes found mine, and she spends the rest of her life hating me for it, which I find I'm not willing to risk. My father looked at me, then back at Alexei. How do I know you won't just kill me once I'm in your organization? You don't. But you have my word, that as long as you work honestly and don't betray me again, you'll live. It's more than you deserve. Alexei extended his hand. Do we have a deal? The seconds stretched. My father stared at that outstretched hand like it was a snake that might strike. Then slowly he took it. We have a deal. Relief flooded through me so powerfully my knees nearly buckled. Alexei caught me with his free hand, steadying me, and the look he gave me held so much. Possessiveness and tenderness and something that looked almost like love. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet. He released my father's hand and wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me against his side. You just agreed to let me keep you. Because if your father is working for me, if he's alive because I allowed it, then you're mine, Emma. Completely and irrevocably mine. The truth of it settled over me like a weight. Or maybe like freedom. I wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. I know, I said quietly. My father looked between us, understanding dawning. Emma. I'll visit you, I told him. Once you're settled wherever Alexei places you. We'll figure out how to be family again. Slowly. That's all I can ask for. His eyes were wet. I'm sorry. For all of it. I know. Alexei's men moved forward to collect my father, and as they led him away, I felt the last threads of my old life snapping. The invisible waitress, the girl struggling to survive. She was gone, replaced by someone I didn't fully recognize yet. "You could have killed him," I said, as we walked back to where Dmitri waited with the SUV. "You wanted to." "Yes." Alexei opened the door for me, his hand lingering at the small of my back. "But I wanted you more, and I'm learning that when it comes to you, I'll compromise things I never thought I could. That's not healthy." "No." He climbed in after me, pulling me across the seat until I was pressed against his side. "But neither is falling for the woman you kidnapped. Yet here we are." "Here we are," I echoed. The drive back to the estate felt different. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. Or maybe I was. But I was a willing one. Alexei's arm stayed around me, his thumb tracing patterns on my shoulder, and I let myself lean into him. "What happens now?" I asked, as the mansion came into view, lit up against the night sky like something from a fairy tale, a dark one, where the prince was a monster, and the princess chose him anyway. "Now?" He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Now I court you properly. I take you to dinners and operas and anywhere else you want to go. I introduce you to my world, not as a prisoner, but as someone who belongs at my side. And eventually, if I'm very lucky, you'll stop fighting what you feel and admit that you want this as much as I do." Arrogant. Honest. He turned my face toward his, and his eyes held promise and threat in equal measure. "I'm not a good man, Emma. I'll never be what society thinks you should have. But I'll protect you, provide for you, worship you. And I'll make sure that every single day you know exactly how much you matter." He kissed me then, and it was nothing like I'd imagined. It was gentle and fierce all at once, claiming and asking permission simultaneously. When he pulled back, I was breathless. "I hate that I want this," I whispered against his lips. "I know." He smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost beautiful. "But you'll learn to accept it. We both will." The SUV stopped at the mansion's entrance. Alexei helped me out, his hand never leaving mine, and we walked inside together, the monster and his willing captive, the Bratva boss and the waitress who'd somehow become his salvation. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was messy and complicated, and probably unhealthy in more ways than I could count, but it was mine. We were mine. And as I let him lead me upstairs to a bedroom that would now be ours rather than just mine, I realized something. Sometimes freedom isn't about escaping your cage. Sometimes it's about choosing to stay with the person who makes you feel like you finally matter. Even if that person is the one who locked the door in the first place. 3 months later, I stood in that same greenhouse where he'd first asked to court me, wearing a dress the color of midnight, and said yes when he asked me to marry him. My father was there, still working off his debt, but smiling through tears. My mother flew in from Seattle, shocked, but eventually accepting. It wasn't conventional. It would never be conventional, but it was ours, built on broken rules and impossible choices, and the strange truth that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing you never knew you needed. And when Alexei Volkov slipped a ring on my finger and promised to spend his life making sure I never felt invisible again, I believed him. Because monsters, I'd learned, could be surprisingly good at keeping their promises.